So just like from the 200s into the 300s, there is a seamless transition into the 400s from the 300s. You will not notice anything as you pass through into that level, but you will notice things changing after a while in that level. And it all depends. Myself, I basically passed through the 400s in a matter of 6 months. So I didn't spend too long. I didn't crystallize in the 400s like some people do. But I had friends or people in my life that did crystallize in the 400s. So I'm going to base this a little bit on what they were like, and also my own experience. But basically, you go through an emotional cleansing storm in the 300s, and you become more soft and feminine inside, and more. It's basically a feminine level, and the 200s like a masculine level, and then the 300s feminine. The 400s you're back to masculine again, and then the love levels it's more feminine, but you're basically merging the feminine and the masculine in the love levels in the 500s, right? So the 400s, you become, after that cleansing storm of becoming more soft inside and healing out all that stuff in the 300s, all that emotional stuff, you become more crystallized and more clear inside in the 400s. You become more structured, like a crystal almost. That's what you become like, especially if you stagnate or if you specialize or, in that level. So what is this level about? You're still, in the world. You're still in the worldly world, but you're on top of the worldly world. That's what the 400s is about. You become you have a robust presence in the worldly world, and people will notice that in you. And you will most likely be successful almost no matter what you take on, like especially when it comes to career and job and these kind of things, and usually also in relationships and family life, and obviously there will be challenges depending on many things, but you will overall be a successful and robust person in the 400s, and you have a lot more clarity in that level, and you become it's basically the level of excellence. Like everything you do, you want to do as good as and as excellent as possible. You drive towards excellence in all aspects of your life. In your career and your job, you will want to do excellent work, and also when it comes to health and fitness, you will want to have a excellent or perfect diet for your fitness program. You want to have you will have a workout program that's really good, and you will have these routines, and you will basically want to strive for excellence in all aspects of your life. And that's the kind of person you become. And also with relationships and friends and whatnot, you will seldom if ever see any attack coming through a person in the 400s. They are not, they are usually not engaging in any kind of attacks and trying to break people down or push people below themselves like so many people do in the lower levels. Usually they will try to help people around them, take care of people around them, and assist and try to lift people up, if anything. They will not try to drag you down, because basically they're much higher than most people. So you don't meet people in the 400 all that often. Actually, it's rare to find, even today. It's not so often you will meet such people, and you will definitely notice it if you do, because you will feel good in their presence. You will feel kind of safe, because there is no potential for attack, or there's very little potential for attack. And especially if you are lower than that person. If you're higher, then it's a different question. But if you are lower than a person in the 400s, that person will not try to break you down or drag you down or put you down. Rather, that person will try to help you, assist you, and in your own self-improvement journey. He will not try to rescue you in that sense. He will just that person will try to assist you and share and basically try to make you conscious about stuff that you're not conscious about, and these kind of things, to help you. And that I had this from a friend when I was below 200. I had a mentor and a friend who was in the 400s, and that person had basically rapidly increased to that level because he went through hell with this femme fatale, this lady that he was involved in when he was in the 200s himself. And that lady basically screwed him over big time in many ways, and he was madly in love with that lady. And that going through all that cleansing that came from that event quickly took him into the 400s, and he basically became like an embodiment of the 400 level, like exactly how it is, because he specialized and stagnated in the 400s. So he became like in that level, he became like a knight on a shining knight on a white horse kind of person. Or if you lived in ancient Japan, he would definitely be a samurai, like that kind of person. He was just robust, always taking care of people around him, helping people, assisting, just an overall good person. And he helped me a lot, and I went through all sorts of stuff when I was in the lower levels, and he was like a mentor, and always trying to make me conscious about stuff and help me see things differently and change my perspectives and my beliefs and all these things. And just hanging out with him, just I felt good in his presence, which I didn't with most people. And I also had an uncle who was always in the 400s, and I remember when I was a kid, I always felt very safe and good in his presence, and especially when I was alone with him. And I couldn't say that with anybody else in my family, but only him, because all of the other people were much lower level, usually in the 200s and whatnot. So he was the only one who was high, like in the 400s, and I really noticed it as a kid. I remember it still today, like how good I felt those few times I was alone with that guy and we did something together, and you just felt seen. I felt seen and recognized, not as a kid, but basically he took me serious, treated me like an adult, so to speak. But still, he was the adult. I was like 10 years. But still, he treated me like that, and that's what kids need. They need to be seen and recognized, not for being a kid, but for being an adult, because that's what they are becoming, right? And if no adult actually see them and recognizes them as what they are becoming, then how can they become an adult, right? So that's really, that's something that people in the 400s do automatically just by being in that level. They understand these things intuitively. And I saw the way he raised his own kids, like he never raised his voice, he never yelled at them. But if he had to correct them or something, he would just sit down and he would talk, close to their ear, like basically almost whisper into their ear, because then they realize this is serious. Like if they did something bad, he would not yell or punish. He would just sit down with them and talk closely into their ear. You lower your voice like that instead of yelling, then the kid really listens, and you're taking that kid seriously, and you don't punish that kid, but the kid understands that he did something wrong, and but you don't traumatize the kid by doing it like that. And I always noticed how amazing that was, how he was raising his own kids like that, because it was so different from other parents, right? So really, like in a respectful way, he was really respectful, to anybody, and that's what you are in the 400s. You don't judge people, and he was the kind of person who was, if there was a turbulence on a flight on a plane, and some person was really scared, and there was a empty seat next to that person, he would walk over to that seat and sit down and talk that person down, basically all the way until the plane was safely on the ground. That's the kind of person he was, right, my uncle, because that's what you do in the 400s. You become a loving person. You don't have unconditional love yet, at least not completely, but still it's a much higher level of love than most people in the lower levels, right, and most average people on the planet. So that's the kind of person he is, and he was obviously also very successful in life and in business and everything, because that's what you become in the 400s. You become a successful person in most anything you try or you put your mind to do, more or less at least. Obviously there are limitations, and in the higher 400s you become almost genius level. You can become genius level scientists and artists and these kind of people who create masterpieces or make breakthrough innovations. That's typical from scientists and whatnot in the people in the higher 400s. So it's a level of excellence and a level of where you're controlled mostly by reason and by logic, but you have a very structured and clear vision of things, and you have a lot of persistence, and you never give up on your goals and anything, and you become just like a very good whole person that takes care of everybody around him, and or you become like what they call a whole person basically, and you're very present in the world as that, and you obviously have a lot of confidence in that level also. But the problem is, or can be, is that you can still have the unworthiness complex underneath it all, because you can't get rid of that. In the reason level, you only face the unworthiness complex, the core issues, the core traumas in the higher 500s, right? So you still might need a lot of recognition from people around you. In the 400s, you still maybe it happens in a more subtle way, but you still sort of, you become almost too perfect in a way. If you specialize in the 400s, you become too perfect and too good for people, kind of, because you're so much better than the average person, and you sort of notice it yourself, and you still need sort of to be recognized for it in many cases. And that can happen subtle or less subtle, but you will hear such people talk a lot about themselves, like not in a bragging way, but still in a very positive way, always talking themselves up in a positive way. And that can become a little bit annoying if it gets too much also, but nobody is perfect anyway, so obviously you still have flaws, you still have things in the 400s, and such people can become like they will need people around them to see them in a certain way. Like they want to be seen and recognized for how good they are, at least in many cases, as far as I've experienced it. And you still have a need in that sense. You still need to be recognized, and you still need to be seen for what you're doing, sometimes at least, not always, but that can be a flaw and a little bit of an issue in the 400s. But the main issue, if you want to transcend and go higher into the 500s, one of the main issues is that you might not even know that such things are possible. If you have no idea about the scale of consciousness, and you have no idea about, you never met an enlightened teacher, and you don't know anybody, because then nobody is higher than you. You probably never met anybody higher than you, right? So you are on top of the world, and there's nothing to look up to, so to speak. So if you don't know about anything else, then chances are you will most likely stagnate and stay in the 400s. And even if you do know about anything else, and these things, and the scale, and even if you know about an enlightened teacher, have been with an enlightened teacher, you can still have a hard time breaching into the 500s, because that's not a seamless transition. Like the 300s into the 400s is seamless. There is a bottleneck at the top of the 400s, and you basically most likely will need the help of an enlightened teacher to get into the low levels, into the 500s, if you are in the 400s. And I myself was only passing through the 400s like 6 months or something, to a year, not sure, but I didn't spend too long in the 400s myself, because I was on a fast track up the scale, right? But I got help from an enlightened teacher. I'm going to talk more about that, how that worked, in the next video about the 500 levels. But what I can say about the 400s is that it's a very good level to stay at. You have a very good life in the 400s, and if you don't want to take it all the way, and you don't want to chase enlightenment or whatever, you can have a very good life in the 400s. The best life you can have, so to speak, is in the 400s in this world, as it is now at least. Maybe later, maybe that will change in the future, but as the world has been and is now, you can have a very good life in the 400s, but you can't really have the same life in the 500s, because then you transcend into a different reality almost. Like it become much more difficult to fit in again. In the 400s you fit perfectly in at the top of the worldly world. But in the 500s you transcend all that, and you lose interest in many of those things, and it becomes really difficult to fit in with regular people like you can do in the 400s. You don't only fit in the 400s, you basically dominate. You're on top of that kind of pyramid. So that's something to consider also. I mean, you can have a very good life in the 400s, but you will not necessarily have that same type of good life, worldly life, in the 500s. That's a completely different dimension, and I will talk more about in the next video. But what I noticed when I was in the 400s, I was still a student, and I was working as a clerk in a supermarket. And I noticed that suddenly, when I was in the 400s, I got a different kind of presence, and I was more like decisive, and you become more decisive and robust in that sense, like masculine. And suddenly, all these like 5 different women my age who used to go to that supermarket and shop and whatnot, they were suddenly all interested in me. They never looked at me before, but suddenly they all paid attention to me. They always came to my register to shop their stuff. And the way they looked at me when I was in the 400s, I could see that they were interested. So definitely my presence had changed, and something had changed, because these women never looked at me before. And no, they did, but I was only interested in one thing, and that was enlightenment, so I didn't really pursue any of that. But anyway, that's just one thing you will notice in the 400s. You become much more attractive to women as a partner, And obviously I can't speak for how it is for women in the 400s because I have no experience with that, and I had never met a woman in the 400 either, so I don't really know anything about that. I can only talk from a male perspective, but definitely if you want to attract a good partner and whatnot, and more easily attract women, you will have that in the 400s, and you basically just attract a good or better life much more effortlessly and easily in the 400s. It just sort of falls into place. I saw this one guy, as a final example, he came to the retreat with an Enlightened teacher where I was spent some years, and he came there like a slob, like he was fat, had like a sweatshirt, sweatpants, basically looked like a basement dwelling loser. And then he went through everything, he went through the programs and everything, and he had some meetings with the teacher and whatnot. And suddenly I saw him again 1 year later, and I couldn't recognize him because he had completely changed. Like now he was slim, he was fit, he was well dressed, his hair was slicked back, and he was talking differently and full of confidence. And he told me that he had started a new business which was successful, and a successful business, and he also had a girlfriend that he met, and he was planning to get married. And I never saw him again after that. He came like 1 year later, and then when I saw him again, he was in the 400s. I measured him for myself just to see what happened, because he was completely changed. So he was basically, he came up there below 200 and he quickly went into the 400s because of all he went through up there. And then in 1 year his life had completely changed. Like he was a different person in all aspects. Could barely recognize him physically, and the way he talked and his confidence level, and suddenly he had a girlfriend, all that because he changed his level up to the 400s. So definitely his life changed, and he's probably living a much better life than he would have, obviously, than if he was below 200 now that he's in the 400s. But he didn't want to pursue enlightenment. He didn't care too much about it. He was just happy he had a good life, so he never came back to the retreats and the teacher. He just basically went back into the world and lived his much better life than he would have otherwise. So that's a possibility. I mean, specializing or crystallizing in the 400s is not a bad idea in many cases. It can be a very good life, or it is a very good life in most ways. So it's all up to what you really want and what's your destiny and whatever. But definitely the 400s is a good place to be.